A question a lot of us homeowners have is, should I continue to be a homeowner or should I think about renting? Particularly as we enter what I call the youth of our senior years. People in their late 40s, their 50s, and their early 60s. Should we keep owning or should we rent? Let's go for a walk and I'll share with you my thoughts. I've got two big surprises for you. One is at the beginning of the video, at least my views I think many of you will find surprising. And then one's going to be at the end of the video. But let me lay a little bit of background as we begin our walk. You know, it's no surprise that the cost of housing has gone up dramatically in the last 5 years. In fact, surprisingly, the average home price in the United States has increased about 50%. The home price up 50% in the last 5 years. Now, as I record this, that's come down just a little bit, but in general, you know, homes were in the upper 300,000s, and now homes, the median home price is somewhere between $4 and $450. So you can say, I think it was 320 before, and now the median is 480. That's a big jump. You know, and generally, the price of a house appreciates at about what the average employment rate increases, because those are the people that are buying our homes, people that are working. And so as salaries increase in our region, it tends to raise the price of homes. And that's one of the reasons in the Bay Area in California, they've seen such incredible price appreciation over the last 2 decades. Is there's a lot of people becoming millionaires in California if they're working in tech jobs, they've got stock options at big tech companies. That provides capital to push up the price of houses. So, you know, if you're in most parts of the country, for instance, here, I'm in a ski town here, and it took a long time for the value of my house to double. And then during the pandemic, a lot of people decided they wanted to live in the town that I'm fortunate to live in. And they drove up the price of real estate. And it took 15 years for the price of my house to increase 50%. And then in 2 years, the price of my house increased another 50%. So one reason to think about selling is just because we may have, this is not a market call, but we may have gotten a decade worth of price appreciation in our houses in the last 5 years. And if that's the case, you know, renting does offer some advantages. And one of those advantages is as we get older, if you have a house, we're collecting more and more junk. And at some point, taking care of all that stuff almost becomes a full-time job. And at least in my case, when my wife and I sold our house, in many ways it freed me up. It allowed me to transition. Just getting rid of 20 years worth of stuff that was really holding me back, and I had to take care of it. And it was very liberating to go, in my case, from living in a 5,000 square foot home to living in about a 1,500 square foot home. I just couldn't keep all that stuff, and that's given me a lot of freedom. So I want to share that. So the first surprise is, I think if you're in your late 40s, your early 50s, your early 60s, and if you've had kids and your kids are heading off to college, boy, those empty nest years are a great time to say, you know what, I want the flexibility, I want the freedom of not having to take care of a house, of not having all this stuff in my life. I want to simplify so I can transition into these other adventures in the go-go years of my retirement. So I think it makes it easier to do that transition. The other thing, you know, for those of you that are already homeowners, we know this and we know it in spades, but I want to share in the video because I think it's important. And that is, when you rent, your rent is the most you're ever going to have to pay for your housing. And this is an old adage in real estate, where if you own, your mortgage is the least amount that you're going to have to pay in retirement. So there's a big difference there. And the question is, do you want to take on that, you know, unknown, you know, your furnace has to be replaced and there's a $25,000 bill you weren't expecting, and maybe there goes that big trip that you and your spouse were hoping to take. So that's something to think about. with a mortgage, again, rent, you pay your rent and utilities, you're pretty well done. Those are easy to kind of estimate. But with a home, you've got your mortgage, you've got your taxes, you've got your insurance, your homeowners insurance, not just homeowners, but also your property insurance to take care of your home. And in places like California and Florida, those numbers have just skyrocketed. The cost of insurance in those two states has really gone up. And the question is, is that a trend that we're gonna see go to other states? So that's something to think about. Another thing is when you own, how big of a mortgage can you have? And if you're doing like I did a couple years ago and you're downsizing, it's one thing to downsize when mortgage rates are 2.5% or 3%, like when I downsized. But now mortgage rates are, as I record this, about 7%. So even though you downsize, your monthly mortgage payment may not change, which is another argument to think about renting. And what are the guidelines for renting versus owning? Your banker, your realtor would tell you it's 28% of your gross pay. But they're in the business of you buying a house. They're in the business of selling a loan. So what, as a financial advisor, and this might be one of the big surprises, why the bank would tell you 28% of your gross pay. Here's what I tell people when they ask me this question, and this isn't financial advice, I don't know your situation, but one of the things I tell people is I'm a fan of the 50-30-20 game plan. And essentially what that is 50% of your after-tax budget, your after-tax, your take-home pay, 50% of that goes to your needs, 30% go to your wants, and then hopefully 20% goes to your savings. So what's 50% of your needs? Your needs are your mortgage, your needs are your utility bill, your transportation, things like that. I would argue your cell phone falls into that category as well. Your wants are things like taking a vacation, it's buying a new mountain bike, taking trips, things like that. Your wants, the things you could put off if you had to. And then savings, I know it's hard to save 20%, but boy, if you can, your future self is gonna thank you. Okay, so the first surprise that I shared is, that it's okay, I think, in your late 40s, early 50s, early 60s to not own. Now, I also think it's okay as you approach your mid to later 60s to buy a home again, so that you can, hopefully lock in and get some price appreciation. Hopefully you're gonna stay in that home for a decade. But, and this is gonna be a big surprise to people, I think home ownership is a young person's game. And I think by the time you end your 70s, you should think about selling your home. There's just a lot of maintenance that takes place. There's a lot of important decisions that need to be made. And at some point, we're not going to be able to take care of our home on our own. Now, that doesn't mean that you move into a senior citizens center, but maybe it means you rent again. So I think there's a period of time when you're young and you have a lot of time and you're buying a home to raise your family in, and you think that, it's a home that you're going to stay in for 15 or 20 years, I think it makes a lot of sense to own. Even if you get unlucky, like I did, I hit the 2006 high and I saw the value of my home drop 20%. And while that wasn't pleasant, I knew I wasn't a seller anytime in the near future. So when you're young, it makes sense to have a home. Then I think not having the responsibilities of a home can be very liberating. And then towards the end, as you get older, I think thinking about not owning a home again is something that can be extremely liberating, and you don't have to worry about that as you get older. So those are some key things I want you to think about. I also want you to think about watching this video here, which talks about 8 things actually that I want you to quit doing as you approach your 60s, so that you can fully enjoy this next stage of your life. 8 things to stop doing in your 60s. It's one of my most watched videos. I hope you enjoyed as well. I'll see you in there. Bye-bye.